Welcome to Priceless Takes.
And we are live from Brisbane, Australia. Welcome back, everyone, to Priceless Takes, episode 67. I'm your host, Luka Price, and joining me today, once again, is Mr. Chris Mallett. Chris, how are we going today? How are we feeling after the weekend of playoff football we've just had?
Feeling great, Luke. I think we saw a lot of excellent games, and of course, my Eagles won, so nothing to complain about.
Your Eagles did win. I must say, I was quite overall on the whole. I thought it was a very good weekend of football. I would have liked the Eagles game to have been a bit more interesting. I would have liked the Packers to have suffered a few less injuries, if I'm being completely honest with you. I also want to say that despite us not talking about the Bills very much today, I would like to give myself some credit because I did say they would do relatively well at containing Josh Allen for a half. That is the Broncos defense. And it should have been 10-10 at halftime if it wasn't for a Will Lutz missed field goal. Chris, do you have any games that you want to give yourself some credit for, apart from the Eagles?
Uh, I think the Rams there sort of pulled through with my thesis on Sam Darnold, and he sort of went back to his former self. I think the moment was too big and there's too much pressure, and he eventually folded.
Yeah, listen, we'll talk about that game later, but I want to get straight into the AFC North battle we had on the weekend because, Chris, this was something that was highly debated between us in our preview episode. And two, I don't think anyone's surprised, the Ravens destroyed the Pittsburgh Steelers. A close score prediction by myself. I was 27-17. It was 28-14. I was nearly there. But Chris, this game was never really close. Baltimore took a 21-0 halftime lead, and Pittsburgh were on their way to losing six straight playoff games. Lamar finished the game 16-21 for 175 yards, two touchdowns, no picks. Russell Wilson 20-29 for 270 yards and two touchdowns. I think he did not play as well as those stats maybe suggest. But, Chris, the story of this game, the Ravens' rushing attack. Derrick Henry, 26 carries for 186 yards, with Lamar Jackson tacking on another 85 rushing yards. Pittsburgh had 29 total rushing yards for the entire game. Chris, this is the highest rushing yards Pittsburgh have allowed in a playoff game ever, and it's the most allowed in a playoff game since 1974, 51 years. Now, Chris, my question to you is, what happened in this game that differed from your original upset pick going into it?
Look, when I took the upset pick, it wasn't with much confidence, but I did feel that Pittsburgh could at least have put up a bit more of a fight. I think what happened is, as you said previously, is that Russell Wilson put up a pretty stat line, but it didn't really show in the gameplay. And I think that really comes into the first half, where as a comparison, the Ravens had 18 first downs, whereas the Steelers just had 17 offensive plays and about 60 total yards of offense. And I think that anyone who was watching the game would have known that there was much more of an effort on Pittsburgh's offensive end towards the second half. But frankly, it was too little, too late. And I think that where it was for players like TJ Watt to really come through and shine, they ended up posting zero stat lines, and there was a lot of emptiness on the Pittsburgh defensive end. What I did say this game would come down to was containing the offensive prowess of both ends of the ball, and frankly, they couldn't do either. And to Lamar Jackson's credit, this was one of his first games in the playoffs where he's looked like regular season Lamar Jackson. So I think what it came down to was a total collapse on both ends of the ball for Pittsburgh. I think that may have to do with the fact that they've had this whispering in their ear that they're just an 8-8 team. They just make just slightly above 500 and they quit thereafter. So I didn't think they had much good mojo going into the game. I thought they'd maybe turn that around, but they didn't. And so, they took the loss.
Yeah, listen, Chris, I think that when you look at this Ravens team, and I tried so desperately to explain this to you, when Lamar Jackson runs the ball effectively, they are practically unbeatable because you just have so many things to worry about. And Chris, in the past, we've seen Lamar Jackson not run the ball effectively and essentially not run the ball at all. Now, you just look at this game, it just opened up the play for the Ravens when Lamar Jackson was running the ball, and then Derrick Henry was able to run the ball, and then that opened up the throw in the end for Lamar Jackson in the red zone. But Chris, I texted you, and I honestly, because I was in the car, I was trying to text you after they scored the first touchdown, Chris, because the Steelers started off, they had an all right first drive. But the Ravens go down and lead a 95-yard flawless touchdown drive. And when I saw that, Chris, I just thought to myself, this game is over. There is absolutely no way. And Chris, I texted you at the end of the first quarter because that was when the first chance I actually had to text you. I wasn't going to get any fines for being on my phone. But in reality, after that first touchdown, when I was in the car, I was trying my hardest to text you that this game is over. And it effectively was, because they just look so good. And I do not think that the Pittsburgh defense, nor a lot of the people watching the game, including myself, were expecting the Ravens to be so flawless on their opening drive of the game. Not to mention, they then go and lead an 85-yard and a 90-yard drive, two separate drives of 85-plus yards, and they just controlled the game. Chris, they nearly won the clock. They won the clock 2/3 to 1. They had just under 40 minutes of possession to Pittsburgh's 20, and their ability to control the ball really never gave Pittsburgh a chance in this game, and they just blew them out of the water, and there was no coming back for your Steelers.
I think what eventually happened was that they ended up only having 9 minutes of offensive possession within the first half, and you can't win a football game like that.
Sorry, say that again. 9 what offensive possessions?
9 minutes of
9 minutes,
offensive possession in the first half. And frankly, when you don't show much domination on either end of the ball, your pathways to victory reduce drastically. And that really showed in taking a 21-0 lead. And I think the last touchdown as well came within a couple minutes of the second half closing.
No, seconds.
Seconds.
Did you about the first half closing or the second?
First half closing, sorry.
Yeah, it was in the final seconds of the first half.
And so when you take those small little bits, it not only does it drastically change the score, but it also ruins the team morale. I mean, you're going into the locker room, you're coming off having just been scored on, and you're expected to come back 21-0. And I think at the end of the day, I don't think anyone anticipated a 21-point lead at any point of the game. I would have liked this game to be a lot closer. I thought they were going to show a lot more grit, but at the end they just couldn't really do anything.
Yeah, Chris, listen, I completely agree. I also want to say that I sort of have a bit of pushback on your TJ Watt point, because I think TJ Watt's there to sack the quarterback. And when you look at how effectively the Ravens were running the ball, there wasn't really any room for TJ Watt to actually be effective. And I think that played into the Ravens' hands because of how effectively they were able to run the ball. TJ Watt and the other Pittsburgh Steelers defenders never really got a chance to get into the game. But I want to talk about the Baltimore defense, Chris, because, you've told me that the Ravens defense, it wasn't really that good. They weren't really holding good teams to low scores. They did it in a playoff game. And Chris, the other thing is penalties has been a huge problem for the Ravens defense this year. There were so many games, especially late in games, where they were getting killed on DPIs. They were getting killed on defensive holding. They were getting killed all over the field. 3 penalties for 14 yards, Chris. That is something moving forward, particularly for this Bills game on the weekend. That is going to be crucial for this Baltimore defense if they want to go anywhere. And that's something that impressed me the most. But that was probably the top 3 thing that impressed me the most was the defense's ability to lock in and particularly to avoid getting penalties, which killed them in the regular season.
Look, I think what it comes down to was what they were getting penalized for in the regular season was really sloppy things that should have been cleaned up anyway. And the fact that they are getting cleaned up now is at an opportune time. I think it's a really good sign for the defense that, like you said, they are locking in. Do I think that this team is the ultimate litmus test of whether you can hold down an offensive firepower? I wouldn't exactly say so. You did say yourself that they would really need Chris Boswell. So do I think that they played well for what they were given? Absolutely. Is it expected for them to be cleaning up their penalties to begin with? Yes. I mean, you can't be them. I'm pretty sure they were the most penalized team in football
Yeah.
for stupid things like taunting and, offensive pass interferences. I remember their first game, they had a lot of false starts coming off the offense. So those things, once they've been cleaned up, I think now you're looking at a really polished and really refined Ravens team. So I think going forward, what it's going to come down to is whether Lamar Jackson can sustain his level of play and not revert to his poor performances in playoffs past.
Yeah, listen, I guess, Chris, as a little side note, you did have the Ravens losing. I'm assuming now you are going to have the Ravens losing in Buffalo this week. Did this
Yep.
performance make you think any differently about the threat the Ravens pose to the Bills this weekend?
I mean, sure. I think Lamar Jackson, like I said, showing his regular season stardom into the playoffs is a great sign. I think 2 touchdowns, 186 yards for Derrick Henry is a brilliant sign. But then again, you are going into a hostile environment up in Buffalo. It's going to be 10 degrees. It's going to be cold. You're going against Josh Allen, who, of course, is essentially a magic man compared to what Russell Wilson can do. So, do I think it's a good sign? Sure, but they were significantly overmatched. You would hope that they would come out with some kind of victory. So yeah.
Yeah, listen, well, I'm excited to talk about the Bills game in our episode later this week. I think when you saw how effectively the Bills ran the ball against the Broncos
Yeah.
and how the Ravens effectively shut down the entire Steelers rushing attack, I think that's a matchup that I'm very, very excited for. And I'm also very excited, Chris, because again, the Ravens continue to keep peaking, and I'm really liking where this is going for Baltimore. But I want to switch gears and talk about the other game that we had on that Sunday slate, the Texans and the Chargers. My Super Bowl pick, what was I thinking in picking against them? They just came out of nowhere, that Texans defense. 32 to 12 over the Chargers. Absolutely destroyed LA. They advanced to play Kansas City in the divisional round. CJ Stroud, 22 of 33 for 282, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Justin Herbert, 14 of 32 for 242, 1 touchdowns, and a career high 4 interceptions. He absolutely killed them, Chris. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. What went wrong for the Chargers? Obviously, Herbert had his shortcomings, but I think there were some other things that played into it. What were your thoughts on this game?
Look, Luca, I think this game was a really interesting one because you had Herbert, who had 3 interceptions the entire season, pulling off 4 interceptions in one game. And I think the question really becomes, was the moment too big for him? Was the spot too bright for him? It's been 5 years. I mean, you've been heralded as the next really generational talent. You've got an insane arm, but where's the production? And I think the other thing comes down to is, well, were the Texans really that great in the first half? I mean, they had a fumble, they had a punt, they had a punt, they had an interception, they had a punt, then they had a touchdown, then they had a field goal. So you had a lot of chances to get back in the game, and they just weren't there. And by the time you let CJ Stroud really get into it, he's already there in the second half. And next thing you know, you've been shredded. I mean, they had a pick six as well. So I think the defense for the Texans really showed up there. I think Derek Stingley showed up. I think Will Anderson showed up, and these people really showed up in the biggest moments when they were needed. C.J. Stroud, though, on the other hand, that's a bit of a question mark in the first half. And as we discussed, Ladd McConkey, you said that he was a great receiver, but this is really what it came down to: is you had Ladd McConkey and you had no one else, literally no one else. Um, and I think if the Chargers looking forward really want to do something, they're going to have to improve the offensive side, the running side of the ball, which at J.K. Dobbins, who you were saying was really good. He had 26 yards for 9 carries. I mean, you just can't really proceed like that. Then you had Gus Edwards with 7 carries for 22 yards. So they were essentially dead on the rushing side of the ball. And on the receiving side of the ball, you knew who it was going to go to. It was Ladd McConkey with 197 yards, great performance by him. And the next biggest receiver was Will Disley with 16. So I think what it comes down to is Herbert needs to. Now, honestly, I don't know the solution to this, but he needs to show up in these big moments and there needs to be a serious retooling of how this team's going to proceed. And as for your Texans, I wouldn't have too high of hopes because if this was any other team, and CJ Stroud is missing in the first half like he was in this game, you could be looking at a drastically different result. I think the Texans defense really saved them there.
Yeah, listen, I there's a lot of things I think this game that I like. There's a lot of things that I didn't like, but I think you're letting Justin Herbert off the hook here. And I also think you're letting the coaching staff off the hook here too. There's a lot of things that I didn't like from this Chargers performance. The first thing that I didn't like is when CJ Stroud throws an interception, okay, your very first play after the interception is Justin Herbert throwing a pass 50 yards across his body into double coverage and just intercepting the ball yourself. I don't completely put that one on Justin Herbert. I put that one on the coaching staff because I think that is an absolutely ridiculous play call to be calling after the Texans give you momentum and they give you an interception. Okay, the second thing is the Texans turned the ball over on their first possession in both of the halves. It literally reminded me of the Jacksonville game, particularly in the first half, how you're on the road, the quarterback throws it in, they had fumbled, Houston did, but Jacksonville threw an interception. They turned the ball over. The Chargers were in complete control. They were up 6-0, okay, and they couldn't muster a solid drive. In the second half, the Texans go down. The Texans go up 13-6. And what do you say? You are saying, Justin Herbert, you are my franchise quarterback. You need to get us back in this game. This game is starting to slip away. And you overthrow a pass and get a pick six. And the game is effectively over when you do that. That just completely took the life out of your team. You overthrow a pass in a clean pocket, by the way, and it goes straight over his head. And that just kills your team when you do that in your most important spot of the entire season. Justin Herbert cannot get let off the hook for that. That is completely inexcusable. And in my opinion, that cost the Chargers the game in that moment.
And Luka, that's exactly what I mean by it's been a few years and you're heralded as a generational talent. We need to see some production. And right after that pick six, Luka, he actually throws another interception.
Okay, that's the one I don't put that one on him because Will Dissly, that was a completely fine pass. Will Dissly needs to catch that ball. He threw it straight into the defender's hands.
Luka,
the one I don't fault Justin Herbert on that pick, but the other three I do.
Luka, but what happens is when you're in those tight moments and you're, 20-6, it doesn't really matter who it's on. It's the fact that happened, that play's already occurred, and that's just another blow to the morale. And I think that's in places where, you're not necessarily gonna win, but you really want to come through and act like you're putting some kind of effort together. And so I think what actually happened was in this game was we saw a decent first half, but within the last 8 minutes of the first half, the Texans scored 10 points, and that really didn't bode well, and that really laid the tone for the rest of the game. So you may lay a lot of the blame on Justin Herbert, but the question is this a matter of Justin Herbert feeling like he has to do everything, or is this really a coaching staff issue?
His defense effectively they forced 3 turnovers, the defense. They effectively shut Houston down for the majority of the first half.
Right.
I get what they did at the end of the first half, but the defense was cooking. Houston had absolutely nothing. It wasn't until the pick, and then it wasn't until they had that play, which led to the touchdown drive where CJ fumbled the ball, and then he got the ball back and threw the ball yard down to, I think Hutchinson's the guy's name, for 38 yards. Those 2 plays effectively changed the game, along with the pick six. Those 3 plays effectively changed the game. But the defense, for the majority of the first half especially, was keeping the Chargers in check. And even in the second half, I'm just looking at it now, even in the second half, they had 3-6. They still held them to 13 points in the second half because
Luka,
you had the
Luka,
interception retouched. You had the interception. You had the pick
Luka.
six.
Okay, so you've made a good case for the blame to be on Justin Herbert. But what do you do here? You've already paid the man, all right? You brought a new coach in. It's his first year. You didn't really perform that well this season. 11-6, I think. Yeah, 11-6. I mean, you didn't really have a running game. You've got Lad McConkey, who was a rookie, I believe. So, I mean, I can't beg but to think that you just got to run it back. What else do you do here?
You're 100% running it back. Listen, I'm not saying that, this is what's going to happen for the rest of Justin Herbert's career, but I'm just saying that for the amount of praise that Justin Herbert gets,
Yeah,
he's a half decade into his football career, and at some point
correct,
we need to stop being, the talent, the less
correct.
than the 3 interceptions in the entire regular season, and he throws 4 in a
I mean,
playoff game.
regardless
The
of what
arm
kind
talent, this and
of
that. Like, he needs to perform, Chris.
regardless of what your situation is in your team, there's no excuse for throwing 4 interceptions in a playoff game when you had 3 interceptions the whole year. That's what
Yeah,
it comes down
I,
to.
I
Yeah,
agree. And listen, there were a lot of problems in that game. The offensive line for the Chargers was a huge problem. There was one play in the fourth quarter, and I'm honestly, when I was watching this game back last night, I was literally thinking, I'm like, I want to try find a way where we can actually analyze the film and talk about it at the same time. But you're just gonna have to sort of bear with me. There was about 12 minutes ago in the fourth quarter, I believe, and there was a play where Will Anderson Jr. was just completely untouched. He was on the edge. There was no one anywhere near him. He just runs straight at Justin Herbert and just gets a sack on his blind side. There was absolutely no one in the vicinity of that man. And that was just one of the many plays that the offensive line really let Justin Herbert down. There was another play in the game. I can't give you the timestamp on this one. I'm just speaking off my mind here. There was a 6v4, okay? And Will Anderson Jr. again, there was just completely just slipped through the offensive line and just sacked Justin Herbert. Now, that one, along with the other one, was what I could not believe watching this game back, how Will Anderson Jr. had a free rush to Justin Herbert's blindside. But the coaching staff, I think, came into this game also thinking this Houston team hasn't done anything. We're going to whoop them. And it just didn't happen that way. So I think
right.
there's a lot to be put on Jim Harbaugh here, which to his credit, he took the blame. But I still believe in the biggest moments of the season, when you had to have it the most, Justin Herbert did not come through.
Yeah,
And
he
that is
disappeared.
why I believe that he is the majority of the blame for this game, because he needed to do better, and they could maybe still lose. But if he leads a touchdown drive to bring it back to 13-all, I think the Chargers could easily have gone on with it from there, Chris.
I couldn't help but agree. I think next year the outlook looking forward is going to have to be get him some offensive pieces, try and land some steals in the draft, maybe trade up, because frankly, what's happening is you're looking at a lack of a run offense, a lack of a pass offense. And so, that's going to be fine in the regular season. You might scoot by. But when it comes to these big moments, as you're saying, you're going to need that reliable, dependable person that you can just throw it to and guarantee your team some yards. So I can't help but agree with you there, Luca.
Listen, Chris, are the Texans back? Was this a fluke or was this reality? What are you seeing from this team heading into Kansas City?
I think the Texans defense is definitely formidable. I don't think they're laughable. As for the offense, it really, really depends on CJ Stroud, right? I mean, I know they lost a couple pieces, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs. I do think they have a lot of good offensive talent. But if CJ Stroud goes missing like that in another playoff game, you can bid them goodbye. That's frankly what it comes down to. So, yeah, I wouldn't say they're back, but I wouldn't say they're an absolute non-factor either.
Yeah, there was a lot in this game that I liked about CJ. I think that play that I mentioned earlier, the snapped fumble, which ended up being a 38-yard gain, I think that was a lot of what we saw from CJ Stroud last year, his ability to get outside the pocket and make plays downfield. And that was something that we saw a number of times in this playoff game once the Houston Texans got going. And I think, Chris, you're right. If the offense isn't going, you're not going to beat Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game.
Yeah.
And I think that CJ is one person that has relatively little experience for even playing Patrick Mahomes. They obviously played recently, but in terms of some of the other high-flying quarterbacks in the AFC, he has really had like the least amount of playoff experience
Hmm.
against Patrick Mahomes. So I think if anything, he is sort of still figuring it out, and he can hopefully put something together because the defense was very impressive. I will give the defense that. They really stepped up, but they are going to go as far as CJ takes them in these playoffs.
Yeah.
Moving on, Chris, as we mentioned earlier, I think you were a lot more firm on this than me, but I still believe I was right with the way that the Rams won this game. The Vikings ship sinks in Arizona as they are down by the Rams 27-9. Stafford 19 of 27 for 209 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. Darnold 25 of 40 for 245, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, and a costly fumble. Chris, Darnold, nine sacks. It's a playoff record for the Rams. Something that we saw, maybe you could say, was foreshadowed in that one seed clinching game against the Lions the week before. Minnesota, what happened in this game? I have my opinions of my own. But Chris, was this game more about the Rams defense coming up big, or was it about the Vikings offense coming up small?
I think Luca, what you'll find is Sam Darnold never had it in him. He never had it in him. And in the first half, you would have seen that Sam Darnold had 0 touchdowns and 1 interception. And that really tells you about the Sam Darnold arc. I told you about the stakes going into this game. His contract, the record, the history of Minnesota going one and done in recent years. And I think that's exactly what shone through here. I think what Sam Darnold has done is he's cost his reputation, potentially his starting job. I mean, you've got JJ McCarthy waiting in the wings, and if this is the kind of performance you'll have when you need it big, you might as well not bother. And in the process, he's cost himself an absolute bag, probably in the sum of tens of millions of dollars.
No, more.
Do I? Sorry?
More than that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Do I think that the Rams, was it a story of the Rams defense? Honestly, Luke, I think it was a bit of both. I think it was a bit of both. We had 9 sacks. That's the most in a playoff game. However, you will see that it was also the most for a loss. It was 9 sacks for a loss of 82 yards.
Yeah.
And a lot of those sacks were not on the offensive line. They were on Sam Darnold dropping back, looking for a pass, looking for a pass, looking for a pass, not getting anything. Down he goes. So, did I think that there were a lot of people like Braden Fisk and Verse coming up big? Yes, definitely. A lot of pressure. But at the end of the day, if you're just not gonna get the ball downfield, it becomes really hard to win a football game. And that's essentially the story of the first half and the story of the rest of the game. So I think it was a bit of both, but a lot of credit to the Rams defense. They really showed up.
Yeah, once again, Chris, so many things for me. When I saw the first play of the game, Matthew Stafford threw an absolute dart to Puka for 27 yards, I was thinking, wow, what a way to start a playoff game. And that capped off an opening drive.
And Luca, this is exactly what I told you about as well. That Super Bowl experience is shining through. And this Sean McVay, that, as you said, McVay and McConnell coming from McVay's coaching tree, but this McVay and Stafford connection is a very real thing. They are now 5-1. Their playoff record is 5-1. So I
Soon to
don't
be
think they're
five
anything
and two, Chris.
soon to be 5-2. I would hope, but they're not anything to laugh at.
No, not at all. And I think the offense really started off this game for the Rams and they put them in good stead. But I think that the defense of the Rams was the story of this game because they completely rattled Sam Darnold. And we saw him get rattled against Detroit, but I think he was more rattled in this game than he was against Detroit. I told you last week, Chris, when the Rams were sitting on their couches resting, they were licking their fingers, watching the way that Detroit was just absolutely coming after Sam Darnold. And I told you, Chris, they had 4 players with 5+ sacks on the season. They can come at you from a variety of different
Yep.
angles. And when you look at the 2 biggest plays of the game, this is what I'm talking about when I want to say I want to do film review, because this, I was just blown away on the interception. Okay, I'm still learning my wide receiver route tree. I'm trying to get more technical with this. On the interception, Jordan Addison runs an out route to the sideline. Okay, Sam Darnold throws it too far inside, and Durant comes in, picks it off. Great pick. Okay. When he fumbled the ball, okay, you watch Sam Darnold. He sees Jordan Addison running out on nearly an identical route, and he second guesses himself because he's like, far out. I just threw a pick doing this exact same thing on the last possession. So he holds the ball for too long, and bang, Witherspoon comes in from the blind side and gets the fumble recovery. And that is the game essentially right there. Because when Sam Darnold threw that pick, he didn't want to make the exact same throw because of what might happen again. And it resulted in the Rams getting a fumble, and that was the game. And when I look at that, they instilled fear in Sam Darnold, and he had nowhere to go because he was just holding onto the ball and he was second guessing himself. He wasn't able to make plays down the field, let alone make many plays at all. And 9 sacks, there's a reason for that, Chris, because Sam Darnold was worried about turning the ball over. He ended up taking all of the sacks. And as much as Sam Darnold needs to be blamed for this performance, I give more credit to the Rams defense for instilling that fear in Sam Darnold, coming at him from all of those different directions.
Luca, I also think you can't discount the fact that the game got into Darnold's head. And that was really, really easy to see after the first couple drives, where it seemed like he sort of got stuck in like a deer in headlights and didn't really do much of anything. And at that point, the game was pretty much over, regardless of what the score was. Because if you walk into a playoff game with no confidence, not only in yourself, but in your teammates, I mean, you can't second guess, like you said, the route being run. You can't second guess their ability to grab those 50-50 passes. And when that happens, you might as well wish the game goodbye.
Yeah, I completely agree, Chris. And moving forward from here, if you're the Vikings, what are you doing now? Are you keeping Sam Darnold? Are you going to sort of do what your original plan was this year and keep Sam Darnold and have make him as a bridge quarterback to JJ McCarthy coming off that injury? Are you getting rid of Sam Darnold? Is someone going to pay Sam Darnold still? Like, do we see a team splurge on him?
Luca, it's an interesting question you bring there. I think 3-4 weeks ago, the undeniable answer was we're going to bring him back. 14-3 is not a bad record at all. But then again, now that you've seen him not go down, but fall down in the moment in a couple of big games against the Lions, against the Vikings, then the question becomes, okay, is that record because of the brilliance of my receivers and my coordinators and Kevin McConnell, or is it because of the point man who's in there? And now let's not ignore the fact, as you said before, that JJ McCarthy's coming in. That's a young man. He's a young quarterback. He wants to get into the game. He's going to need that rookie experience sooner rather than later. And frankly, if you can't polish him up quick enough, you might lose, an enigmatic character such as Justin Jefferson, by far the best wide receiver in the game. And so the question comes down to is it worth bringing him back? And I think what that boils down to is for what price? It has to be the right price. Is there a value in bringing him in, having JJ McCarthy learn behind him? Sure. I mean, he's a veteran. He's got that experience. Do I think that they're going to go deep into the playoffs and have any real chance at success with Darnold in the postseason? Probably not. So I think that's what it comes down to. And I really don't think that Darnold is going to command any amount of serious money with any other team simply because he's perfect and suited for that situation. And as you said, it's more of a placeholder to just pass the time for now. So I think Darnold really cost himself essentially his career with these two games. I don't think any team is going to look at him any more seriously, and I think he's had enough chances and he just doesn't show up in these big moments. So if I'm the Vikings, I'm going to say, well, is it worth it bringing you back for $40 million dollars or $30 million? Dollars? I know some people have suggested that maybe we should give him the Baker deal. You know,
That
30
was going to be my
million.
question.
Yep, 30 million for 100 million for 3 years, 30 million each. And so, I mean, I guess it comes down to the Vikings. Personally, I wouldn't take it. I would take my chance on JJ McCarthy and see how it goes.
Yeah. Listen, I think Sam Darnold, I think for a lot of the season was playing a bit in over his head, but I also think it was a lot of this season came down to, wow, how good a coach is Kevin O'Connell being able to put Sam Darnold and the offense in these positions. And I think that when push came to shove, I think we saw Kevin O'Connell sort of deviate away from his coaching style. The Minnesota Vikings on fourth down, they attempted the least amount of fourth downs in the entire NFL this season. We
Hmm.
saw them yesterday go 1 for 5 on fourth down, and we saw them I think it was 1 for 4 on fourth down yesterday, or 1 for 5 in the week before against Detroit, go 1 for 4, 1 for 5 on fourth down too. So I think that I don't think, and this is the thing, I think because Sam Darnold was playing so well, I think it was more so it started off with the praise of Kevin O'Connell, but then it sort of deviated into, well, maybe Sam Darnold is someone who we think he's a new person now, he can actually carry the load. And I think we sort of what you were saying, gone back to reality now that Sam Darnold isn't, he can't carry a team. He needs to be put in good positions. And I think this playoff game, like I said in the beginning, came down to the coaching matchup too.
Yeah.
Another play that absolutely killed them, and something that I put on Kevin O'Connell, but more so again when I talk about the Rams defense, 4th and 2 right before the half, which allowed the Rams to go up 24-3 at the half. They had a 4th and 2, which resulted in Sam Darnold getting sacked, but the Rams are able to get home with 4 on that play, and the Vikings had 6 offensive linemen in that play trying to protect Sam Darnold. And that resulted on you having a 7-on-5 down the other end. Oh, sorry, a 6-on-4 down the other end of the field. Sorry, no, a 7-on-4 down the other end of the field because Sam Darnold just had nowhere to go. But the Rams were able to get home with 4 players, and Sam
And
Darnold takes
and
a sack.
and Luca, I think Brian Flores is an excellent defensive coordinator, and he really showed his steel this season. But what it comes down to is the Vikings lost to two teams this season, and that was the
Yeah,
Rams
and the
twice,
Lions.
including the
Yeah.
playoffs, and the Lions.
Mm.
And these are going to be your teams that you're going to see in the playoffs. So I think there's a lot of questions to be asked this season on behalf of the um, on behalf of the Vikings. And it's going to be, well, there's going to be a lot of sitting down need to be had because this is a talented team. This
Mm.
team does have some talent. And so it becomes, in a weird way, it becomes really difficult to assign blame. Where did they need to improve? So I think there's a lot of questions to be asked, but I still think that this team has a lot to show in coming years.
Yeah, I completely agree, Chris, and it will be interesting to see what they do in the off season. Because yeah, there's a lot of different directions this team could go. But I want to talk about the final playoff game on our agenda today. A game that we both thought, I can't actually remember your score prediction, Chris. I don't think you actually thought this game would be close, but I certainly thought this game would be close. But unfortunately, the dice rolled the wrong way for both of us. The Washington Commanders and Jaden Daniels command their way
Look,
to a win.
I just want to say for those of us that tailed our bet, Mike Evans anytime touchdown, that cashed.
That did
Just
cash.
it did cash.
I was
So
I also was on a Terry McLaurin anytime TD, and that ended up cashing as well. So that was one of the few games of the weekend, actually, Chris, where the best players on both teams actually scored touchdowns. Um,
yep.
So that was good to see. But the Commanders walk it off in Tampa, commanding their way to victory 23-20 over the Buccaneers. They'll go to Detroit to face the Lions in the divisional round. Baker Mayfield, 15 of 18 for the game, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns, but a costly fumble. Jaden Daniels, 24 of 35, 268, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. Big story of the game, Chris. Baker Mayfield fumbles the ball. Whether we place the blame on him, whether we place the blame on the center, and that little debacle there, I want to get your thoughts on that because I effectively think this was the game, really, for the Buccaneers. There was that play, and there was also a play when the Buccaneers did get the ball back. They drove down the field. They had 2nd and 1 from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Washington 12, and they weren't able to convert, particularly on that 3rd down play where it looked like there was some problems snapping the ball. But Chris, how disappointing was this loss for Tampa Bay?
Look, I don't exactly think that this was the most surprising thing. And what we really had Jaden Daniels come out and play was basically a flawless game. This was a flawless game. This was one of their games in which the Commanders had 0 turnovers and no punts. All right? And this has already happened 3 times. This has happened against... this is the 3rd time it happened. The first time being against the Giants and the Bengals, and granted that was earlier on in the season. But this was a game in which it was of course they won on a doink field goal. But I think it was really surprising the way that the Commanders played, that the game was as close as it was. I think I think rightfully so, the Commanders deserve to win. Do I put a lot of blame on the center or whatever? Honestly, I think these things happen as part of the game. There's always these little tendencies and variations. Kickers miss kicks. But I do think that what we saw here was a really great game in which both teams really came out and shined in ways they wanted to. This game was really crucial. It was really close. And ordinarily, if this wasn't a close game, these things would not be counted as this is where the game tilted, this is where the game happened. But you had a really close game, a really good game that went back and forth. And that's when you start pinpointing these small moments that this was the moment, that you ordinarily don't pick up in other games. So I think that's why there's a lot of critique on particular moments. But I think Tampa Bay, it wasn't the most disappointing thing. I mean, in some ways, you look at the game now and you think that they were significantly overmatched.
Chris, I really do not think you can call the only turnover of the game a small play. I think that literally was the game. Because when you look at how the game played out from that, Baker fumbled the ball with 11:58 to go in the game, okay?
No,
And
Luka, when I say small play, I mean that you draw your attention to very particular things. Was there a fumble? Yes. Do I think that there were still chances for them to come back in the game? Sure. I mean, the game could have gone a lot of ways. They did win on a doink field goal. It wasn't that that then led to a 20-0 run.
Yeah, but the playoffs, Chris, they come down to small margins.
Yep.
And the
Sure.
teams
I agree with
that
that.
are better prepared and pay attention to the details and get those things right, those are the teams that win playoff games, okay? And a simple thing like a center snapping a ball on time, and to be in fairness, I don't truly know what happened, okay? Because it's one of those things where, for all you know, Baker could have called the play too early, or the
Mhm.
center could have messed up the snap count, or McMillan went in motion too early. The only players that really know what happened in that moment are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers players. But when you look at that fumble and then you look at your 3rd and 1 from the Tampa Bay 12, okay, you're still only down by 3. If you go and score a touchdown in that spot, you make Washington have to go and get a touchdown drive on the other end, and you
Yep.
botch the snap again, and Bucky Irving gets a loss, and then you have to take a field goal. Those are the differences between wins and losses, okay?
Yep.
And you look at the timing of the game, as I was saying before, Baker fumbles the ball with 12 minutes to go in the 4th quarter, okay? They don't get the ball back, okay? I think then Washington got the ball back with 4:41 to go. Okay, if Baker doesn't fumble that ball, okay, they go down and get a field goal or they get a touchdown, then we see a scenario where potentially Washington gets that drive from Tampa Bay, and then Tampa Bay is the one who has the ball with 4:41 to go, with the potential to ice the game from there. But because they committed that turnover, that completely swapped the timing of the game, and we saw Washington have the ability to end the game at the buzzer. When if we don't see that fumble or we don't see that botch snap at the Washington 12, we could be seeing a completely different ball game where
Luka,
Tampa Bay is the ones that have the ball when the
correct.
when the final
Correct.
buzzer sounds.
I do agree with the scenario that you put out, and it's very more likely that they win. I think the word here is more heartbreaking than disappointing, right? Let's think about this team. This Tampa Bay team, of course, had a decent showing last year beating the Eagles. Coming into this year, they didn't really have that much of an expectation. It was not like they were going to go anywhere deep within the playoffs. Okay, they come up against a rookie quarterback. We did bring out a statistic of rookie quarterbacks on the road generally don't win.
Yeah.
They don't. So you did have a lot of people having Tampa here. And to lose in a way like this, I'd say is disappointing, but I think it's more heartbreaking because you had a statistically really, really good game from Baker Mayfield. Right? You had him with a passer rating of 146.5.
83% completion. Baker played great. I don't dispute that. But in the playoffs, the teams that execute the best usually win playoff games. And I think when it comes to something like snapping the football, I don't see how you can say that is heartbreak. I think that is poor execution from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense as opposed to heartbreak.
Well, look, I don't know the statistics, but I'm sure that they've been doing it excellently the rest of the season. For the rest of the season,
yeah, I'm
right?
Sure
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So when because you win and lose as a team, right? And so when one member of your team, let's assume you're on the defensive side of the ball and the snap goes bad, for you that's heartbreaking. There's not much you can do to influence that situation. And so when I say it's heartbreaking, it's more like, okay, we've come this far, all this way, we've done all this right the whole season. One thing goes wrong, it messes up your whole season. And I 100% agree with you. That's exactly where you need to be in the playoffs. But the way I'm taking it is that when something's disappointing, you immediately want to try and rectify it. How do you rectify this? I mean, do you practice more? What steps do you take?
Yes, you practice snapping the ball correctly. That's exactly what you do. That's something you shouldn't mess up. Not once, Chris, twice. You can live with, okay, I made a little error. I snapped the ball. I messed it up. We fumbled, okay? But for it to happen again, minutes later, in one of the most crucial spots in the game, that is inexcusable.
I agree with that. Twice in a row.
It's inexcusable. And also, we don't really know what happened, but we know that there's a rookie center who is snapping the ball, and it seems like the whole offense, especially on that second play, okay, the whole offense seemed to be completely on different pages, okay? But it comes down to moments, Chris, and Jaden Daniels had the moment of the game because Elijah Cansey could have sacked him for a loss on that 3rd and 1, and instead Jaden Daniels avoids the tackle, goes and gets the first down, which effectively allows them to win the game. It's the moments, Chris. And I would think Tampa Bay in that spot, they need to be the ones when coming up against a rookie quarterback that need to come up with those moments, and they didn't. And they failed to execute.
It's also knowing that the Commanders are a very bullish team. They do go for those 4th down chances similar to Dan Campbell, which I think we'll talk about here in about 30 seconds or so. But I think that's a big thing that you really need to be aggressive and on point when the other team is coming and going to throw the kitchen sink at you. So yeah, I guess this game was a disappointing loss for Tampa. Do I think that? I guess in the sense that their expectations shouldn't have been too high to begin with. It's the manner in which they lost that really contributes to this disappointment.
It's still a backward step, Chris. Like they lost a home playoff game, and last year they won a home playoff game. So
that is true.
It's a backward step. And I think when you look at the way that it happened, that a team with as much experience, it's 5 straight years they've been in the playoffs. Okay, only 3 years
Look,
with
they're in one of the
sorry,
weakest.
7 years with Baker.
They're
But
in one of the weakest divisions. They win with okay records because the rest of their division sucks. That's pretty much why they get into the playoffs.
but they still like the Rams don't have a horrible division, and they still made it into the playoffs with the same record, right? The Buccaneers are still a good team, and we
The Rams
expect
had
them.
the Ram. To be fair, the Rams had significant injury issues towards the middle of the year. They had Cooper Kupp out, Nakua out. These big players that they need to come through. But I completely agree with your point. In that it's like extremely disappointing to lose in that fashion when these are things that you should have sealed off. This is the main difference between what I was talking about in the Ravens, is that you do not want to lose on some silly penalty like they were getting, and they've cleaned up now towards the end of the season, as you're saying they're peaking. Whereas a team like Tampa, in the manner in which they lost, they've gotten messier in that moment, which of course, as you said, is extremely crucial, which they need to be much tidier at. So yeah, I'd say
Yeah,
it is.
listen, we could talk about the Buccaneers a different time, but I want to know, Chris, chances Washington can pull off an upset in Detroit next week. I won't get an official prediction from you, but what is your gauge heading into the divisional round for this team?
I see, Luca. You have to look at the surrounding context of the game. All right, you've got Washington coming in off a pretty bad season last year, hoping to improve slightly and see some promise in their quarterback. And what they've done is they significantly overshot that. And essentially, what you're in a position now is you're playing with house money. You have the chance to go with the 1 seed. You have a chance to, give them a bit of a shock. They might even be sleeping a little bit, considering that they might be in the mindset that, oh, we're the 1 seed. We got the divisional round. We got the break, and so I actually give him a decent chance. I'm not counting him out here. I think that Dan Quinn is an aggressive coach. I think Dan Campbell is an aggressive coach, and I think
Hmm.
it's going to be really interesting seeing those two personalities clash in their play calls and how they want to proceed. We know that both these teams have been going for fourth down the entire year, and I think I honestly, Luca, I don't count him out, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, listen, my early thoughts, honestly, are that I feel like I've seen this script before with CJ Stroud last year. And I think a lot of people are going to jump on the Washington bandwagon. I am a little bit tempted to as well, but I think this Detroit team is rested. I think they're going to have a game plan. I look at the way Bucky Irving ran the ball. He wasn't as effective as I thought he would be, but he still was 4.5 yards per carry on 17 carries. Now, if what you're saying is true and David Montgomery is going to come back for the divisional round, I
Yep.
think even without David Montgomery, I still expect the Detroit offense to be very potent, and I expect Jameer Gibbs to run all over that defense. And I think that I think Detroit poses a lot of challenges, and I think they're going to be rested, and I think they are going to be fired up and ready to win this playoff game. And I
I
think it
mean,
might be too much for the Commanders to handle.
Luca, I think it's also important to know. I'm sure you can enlighten me more, but how many players does the Detroit Lions have on IR on the defense?
Uh, it, I, Good question. At one point, it was 12, then it went down to 9 for the Minnesota
Right.
Vikings game.
And so coming off IR, even if they just came off IR, they're not going to be 100%. Especially when you got the pressure to go and play in the playoffs. Players are willing to play injured. I mean, I'm sure you saw that Bo Nix was playing with back fractures for the latter half of
Yeah.
the season. And so that definitely affects how they're going to play. Do I think that this could become a shootout? Definitely. Definitely. If Jaden Daniels comes out and plays one of these flawless games again, you're gonna have a really, really, really tough matchup for Detroit, and I don't think this is something that they should sneeze at. I think that I'm gonna give the Commanders a decent chance. Well, are they going to be the favorite? Obviously not. Obviously not. But I think the mentality that they're playing with house money, the aggressive coaching styles, the sort of all or nothing mentality in that, we might as well show out with what we have because this season was not meant to be all that. I think that's going to be big. And yes, I am reading David Montgomery was a full participant. But there's also, like I said, coming off IR, there's comments that, he had a very strenuous rehab and, it was a tough recovery process. So I think all of these things are going to play into a factor. But at the end of the day, I give him a decent chance.
Yeah, I guess we'll see when we do our playoff predictions later in the week. But I just think that Detroit, I think, is just sort of like a bull just knocking out everything in its
Mm.
path right now. And I think that they present some problems, the Commanders' offense, but I think that Detroit, I think, just has a lot of problems that the Commanders, I don't think, will be able to overcome. And yeah, Montgomery had a full practice on Tuesday and will return Saturday against the Commanders. So I think even with that, I think that is going to be a huge problem with Detroit's rushing attack. And I think we saw them with Gibbs solo in the backfield, just absolutely carve
But
up
Luka,
defenses.
exactly. Gibbs was still really, really good by himself. And, maybe you don't see the half and half split. You might see a little bit more workload put on Gibbs, but that's still really good on the offensive side running the
Yeah.
ball.
Yeah, listen, we'll get more into that game later, but I want to briefly touch on the Eagles, Chris. You
Hmm.
have some concerns about their offense, I
Yeah, I
presume.
do.
What's
I
what's
do.
happened? The Eagles 22-10 over the Packers. But Chris, you're not impressed. What did you not like about this game heading into the divisional round against the Rams?
So, Luca, obviously with the Eagles being my team, I did watch this game with full concentration and intent.
Mm.
And, you don't, if you were watching the game, and I'm sure you did watch after the fact, but if you did watch the game, you would have seen that the game was never really that close. And what ended up
Mm.
happening is in the first half, you had a really good first quarter in which the Eagles came out roaring. And at that point, it was pretty obvious that there was not going to be much of a fight back, and they sort of took their foot off the gas. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think in a playoff game you should be having AJ Brown with one reception for 10 yards. I think in these moments you need to give your players these reps so that they can shine in the bright lights. Jalen Hurts putting up 131 yards, them being 2 for 11 on third downs. I think these small variations. I mean, they did win the game by 12 points, which was excellent. And I think my prediction was really close to that. I
It
think
was.
so. And I think that's good and all, but I think that if the Eagles really want to have a fighting chance against the bigger, better teams, like the Lions in the NFC, and if they get to Super Bowl, the Bills or the Chiefs or the Ravens, they're really gonna need to show out because you're in the playoffs now. There's nothing else to keep in the tank. We know that when Jalen Hurts was pressed to throw the ball, he did, but I really, really want to see him get that ball downfield. Um, we did see the Ravens. They had a sequence where they ran the ball 15 straight times, and then they threw it to Likely, I believe, for an 8-yard completion, and that's good and all. But if I'm back in a team, I want to see them really get it done on both sides of the ball, especially with Lamar. He was definitely more of a passer throughout the whole season. Jalen Hurts, they're one of the least passing teams in the league, preferring a traditional run offense. And I think that if you have this going forward in a game where, just because your big players haven't gotten reps in these moments, that they start to falter in those in these games, it's going to become a serious concern. And I do think there would have been it should have been 29-10. Of course, Saquon, he goes for the
Mm.
kneel.
That
You
ruined all
know,
the people's
a
multis,
lot
I'm
of people were
sure.
upset about that. A lot of people were upset about that. But
Mm.
that's essentially what I'm getting to. It was a good game, but the score should have been a lot more, and the game never really felt that close, regardless of what the scoreboard shows.
Yeah, and I think that it was sort of something that I was saying is that I think the Eagles were in control of the game the entire time. And I thought the only way the Packers could win is if they jumped on them early and they fumbled the kickoff return on the first play, which Chris, I mean, don't really want to talk too much about it, but I thought that was a little bit of a dodgy call,
Oh yeah,
if
100%,
I'm being
100%. I
completely
think I
honest with
think
you.
I think that was the Packers' ball.
I
But
I don't
but
I don't
but
think
but
I
Luca,
don't think it I don't
they
think it
had
changes the outcome of the
exactly.
game
They
at
had so
all.
many people go down. So it was like every single play someone was getting
Yeah,
injured.
I know.
WR1, WR2, WR3.
Yeah.
It was honestly so I felt bad watching because I'm like who I mean they're gonna have to get a guy from the stands at this point because
Reminded me of the Purdy NFC Championship game a few
yeah.
years back.
Yeah, exactly. And you know the other thing was Jordan Love didn't look like he wanted to be there.
No.
Every snap was disappointment, and that really doesn't help your team. You go on the sideline, you're looking depressed, you're looking sad. So, so do I think it was a good win for the Eagles? Sure, but I have some very, very real concerns that I previously didn't have before.
Yeah,
And I honestly,
yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether you think that this is just one game, one sequence, or if there's genuine issues. Because some have come out and said this was one of the worst games the Eagles have played all season in terms of how they played on the offensive end. Because the defense showed up. The defense definitely showed up. 3 interceptions. The defense was there. It's just the offense.
Yeah. Listen, I'm a little bit conflicted because I think there's two sort of different ways you can look at it. The way that I'm sort of looking at it right now is as long as Saquon Barkley is running the ball effectively, I think the Eagles are going to be fine. Okay, but then this is sort of the hypothetical that I was saying before the Packers game is, well, if Saquon isn't able to run the ball effectively, can you trust Jalen Hurts to keep them in this game? And
Yeah.
we still don't know the answer to that because the Eagles were in control of the game the entire time because Saquon was able to run the ball effectively and because the Eagles were very effective on defense in stopping the Packers. So I really don't know how I feel. I do know how I feel about Jalen Hurts a little bit because he actually started the game off pretty well, but
Yeah.
it was as the game went on that he actually looked more rusty, and that is,
It
I
was
guess,
it, it was a bit weird.
and that
It was a bit
concerns
weird.
me a little bit because I would rather him start the game off a bit shaky and then sort of settle into the game. But
Yeah.
I think as long as, like I said, as long as Saquon is running the ball effectively, I really don't have too many concerns about Philadelphia. And I'm very keen to talk about it more in our next episode, Chris. But final words from you because we are running out of time.
Well, look, I just wanted to get your thoughts on something.
Yeah.
Just very briefly, was there anything this wildcard weekend that really, one pertinent thing that really jumped out at you?
Yes, that my Ravens to win the Super Bowl take is such a good
Okay,
take. That is
okay,
what jumped out to me.
sure, sure.
That 100%. I think the Bolt, and this is the one thing I can say. I think Baltimore is a lock to beat the Bills, an absolute lock, and I can't wait to debate it with you next episode. Chris, is there anything that you found out about this wild card weekend that you liked?
Oh, I think the Rams are real. I think the Rams are a real team.
Yeah,
That's
valid.
all I'm gonna say.
Valid. Listen, guys. Well, that is all for Priceless Takes episode 67 wildcard review. We will be doing the preview for the divisional round, hopefully in the next coming days, and we will get our official predictions for the divisional round. Chris, I'm looking forward to seeing you in that episode, and thank you once again for joining me today.
You too, Luke. I think it's always great to chat, and I think we have a lot of engaging discussions coming up. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, Chris. Well, guys, make sure to keep following our social media. We are on Instagram, we are on TikTok, both at the handle at Priceless Takes. I will post them down in the description as always for those of you that want to follow. Lots of entertaining content, lots of shorts from the podcast, as I know the episodes do get a little bit long sometimes. So we always try to post the best parts of the podcast on our social media channels. But that is all for Priceless Takes, episode 67. I am your host, Luca Price, and we will see you next time.